Hello, everyone, to another author interview. Today, we'll be chatting about the new book, Using Metering to Perform Energy Management, Performing Data Analytics via the Metering System. With me are the authors, George Barksdale and Kecia Pierce. Hi, and welcome.
Thank you.
So I guess the first question, can you both speak a bit about your backgrounds and how did you come to collaborate on this book? And sort of following into that, what inspired you to write the book on energy management and meter management systems?
Okay, well, my background is in software engineering. And so I have worked with Buster for a number of years. We do energy management training for the Army on the Army's meter data management system. And so we have about 17 courses that we teach. And there's a lot of information that we provide and that's really beneficial to energy managers and resource efficiency managers. And so Buster had the bright idea of putting all of this information together in a textbook that we could provide to our users. Buster, you want to add to that?
My background is I'm retired Air Force. I was in civil engineering with the Air Force, and I went out and I was really blessed with having a good superintendents that helped me along. And so I got to learn a lot about maintenance and ended up inspecting maintenance. I ended up doing a lot of training, and I found that there's a lot of things that go on that we've got the engineers and the maintenance folks have to cooperate on and work together to do. We incorporated that into a lot of our things that we developed from our meter analytics. And when we did that, we found that there's a lot of stuff we can learn from the analytics, a lot more than we ever imagined. And so we found that we ended up putting together, as Kecia said, about 17 courses. And we found that people really had trouble keeping up with, we do an hour for each course, and we repeat that every 2 months. And so there's a lot of details there, and we get into a lot of detailed calculations and stuff like that. So we said, okay, let's put something together to help the folks so they can read it, they can have a chance to digest it, and then they can ask intelligent questions about it. So that's what generated the book.
Mm-hmm. So going more into the book, could you give us an overview of the main benefits energy managers can derive from implementing the tools and processes discussed in your book?
As we got into analyzing data, when I was a lieutenant, we only use EUI data. As I started looking at meter data, we found out that we could break it down into quite a few pieces, and we could break down the constant loads, which was our flat loads, and we found out that that was very telling for us. And so we were able to split up that constant usage versus the variable usage, and that helped us to identify the systems. And we found that in a lot of cases, our flat loads were 35% of the energy of an institutional facility. So that was quite telling from that alone. That's a lot of savings just associated with that 35%. And then we found that the variable loading added about another 10 to 15% onto that of usage. So we were able to start breaking that down, identify all the excess usage, as well as we were able to break it down into different energy subsets. And when we did that, we were able to break down all of the different systems. So we could break out lighting, air conditioning systems, fans and pumps and stuff like that, and be able to understand what lighting systems we had in the building just from reading the energy data. We could tell what kind of a efficiency our air conditioner was running by reading that data. So we were able to break that down into quite a few things that we never had before, just as we evolved over time. And then the more analysis we did, the more analytics we could perform on data. And we found that we were able to add onto the top of existing programs that we built and make it more detailed to help the energy managers, I'll call it, save time, as well as focus them quickly on where the problems were.
Mm-hmm. So in your opinion, what are the most significant challenges energy managers face when it comes to optimizing their time and resources?
I think that time is the most significant problem that they have right now. We generally don't have the number of energy managers in the field that are needed to do their job. And so what we've tried to do here is save the energy managers time. They have more paperwork now than they ever had in the past. Analytics time, things we used to spend a lot of time on. Like we would do audits for a week. We would do modeling for a week. The folks don't have time for that anymore. So we try to save that time. And there's some things that we do in the analytics programs that we put together that can save them 70% of their time. And we think that's significant. That allows them to make better decisions, and they're not distracted by doing a lot of calculations that we ended up doing, 40, 50 years ago. So it's a big advantage to them from that perspective.
Mm-hmm. So your book also covers benchmarking in depth. Can you elaborate on how energy management can utilize benchmarking to identify potential energy savings for each energy system?
Yeah, what we did in the past is EIA data, was the sort of the thing that we ended up having to use. And we found that that's sort of generic and it applies to a fairly broad spectrum of situations. So when we started looking at portfolios of facilities, we found we could break down the category types fairly significantly. And so in some category types for some institutions, we had over 300 categories, whereas the EIA database, may have 18. So, for example, an administrative facility or an office space only has one category in EIA. We find over 40 categories that just sort of fit within that spectrum. But within that, you can have a variance between those of 50% in some cases when you start looking at benchmarking just the EUI. And so we found that we were able to do that as well as to break it down into climate zones and other things that are just happening on facilities. We were able to do a lot better benchmarking and identify. We also came up with other benchmarks, which were a big benefit. We were able to benchmark the flat load or that constant load, which we call the base load. And that enabled us to learn how many horsepower was running when it shouldn't be running. So we were able to identify, let's say you got a 5 horsepower equivalent of motors running at this time at night that shouldn't be running, and so that they could quickly go and figure out which motors were running and figure out why they're not under control. So we benchmarked that, as well as we found that we benchmarked the percentage of usage compared to the base load. And we found in a lot of cases for institutions that you could have 45% of the energy used in the base load, which is massive when generally they're going to be 8 to 15% is all the base load should be. So a lot of things that benchmarks sort of came a long way over the past 4 or 5 years as part of our research.
Mm-hmm. So Kecia, you mentioned your background is in software development. So how do you see the integration of software analytics and energy management evolving?
Well, I was brought onto this project because my background was in GIS. And at the time, we were integrating the GIS into the Army's meter data management system. So as software evolves, we really adding new tools we call it a sprint cycle to enable them with better tools. So the GIS, for example, gives them an overview of the health and status of their meter network. So see an installation, you see all the meters on the installation. Red pins indicate meters that are offline. Green indicates meters that are reporting. So just a visual tool to quickly give them that picture of offline meters for them to go troubleshoot and get back online. In the energy management spectrum, we've added, probably 20 to 30 modules that enable them to come in and analyze their data, whether that be on usage, the benchmarking modules. We've got the EUI and measurement and verification module that allows them to go and put in projects for buildings and then be able to run that analysis after the project's done to see what kind of savings they've implemented for that project. So, the software's limitless in what we can do, and Buster's always coming up with new ideas for modules for helping them. And we've got a great development team behind us that help integrate that software into really functions and modules that provide them with valuable tools.
So how do you both see the role of meter management systems evolving in the future? And what impact do you think it will have on energy management practices?
I think that analytics will just keep getting better from that perspective. We'll do something and we'll think, oh, this is pretty cool. This helps to do this. And then, after we work with it for a year or something like that, we'll come up and say, oh, we can do this. I mean, for example, when we came up with scatter plots, we were doing it to do normalization, weather normalization. And we found out we could split it into duty and non-duty hours, and that we could then start breaking it down into energy subsets. So it evolved over 3 years into something where we could break down the systems into a lot of their usage. So I would say we're going to just keep getting smarter from that perspective, and we'll be able to predict what happens when, and then be able to figure out what to attribute it to. And, we keep coming up with new tools just because of that. So I would say that we're going to get better. We're going to save more time. And I think that we'll make them simpler to use also. Sometimes when they first come out, they're a little rough around the edges. And so we try to make them a little easier to use as time comes on too, to make it a little more indicative, intuitive is probably a better word, for an energy manager to use them. And then they don't have to think a whole lot, because we use them every day. An energy manager may not use them but once every few months. And so we don't want them having to relearn things every time they do that. So I'd say that things will get easier to use, and then they'll start saving additional time from that perspective.
So I guess as a last question, what do you hope readers will take away from your book, and how do you see it impacting the field of energy management?
Well, I will say, for the energy managers and the RIMs that we've provided the book to, we've gotten really great feedback. I know one RIM said that he had learned more in the first 2 chapters than he'd learned in a lot of his other training. So, I just hope that it helps them to do their jobs better and provides them some assistance. A lot of these new energy managers and RIMs, when they come on board, we liken it to drinking from the fire hose, because there's so much information. It's hard to focus. But that would be my hope, is that it's just a useful tool for these folks.
Say that I hope that it, as they go away, they'll see that, hey, this is fairly straightforward. It's not rocket science. It's been thought through, and it's easier for us to do. I'm hoping that knowledge will increase, that they'll become more productive, and that the energy aspects will become more predictive from their point. I think that they'll find that it's easier to do analytics now than it was in the old days, when you'd have to pull out all of your ASHRAE books and flip back and forth to figure it out and do those kinds of things. It used to take us a week to do an audit, where the system now can save you 80% of that time by filling out most of the data already. It used to take them a week to do modeling, when the system can, quite frankly, be a little more accurate than the modeling programs. So we've done some things, and I'm hoping they take that away, that 1, they feel comfortable with the tools, 2, that it can save them time and money, and hopefully it focuses on some areas that they didn't think about before, like the base loads, we generally never talked about in the past, and can find that that's a huge savings that are just lost in the base loads that we really only talked about on the design side, which is usage, efficiencies, and things like that we can do those from our tools. So hopefully the book will help them to get some nice ideas there about it. So
yeah, I hope so too. Okay, thank you much again to the both of you. And I will link the book down below in the description, so be sure to check it out. So, using metering to perform energy management, performing data analytics via the metering system. Thank you.
Thank you.